Well, it's just personal preference, but I always like to begin with the header. So in this case, the part that I'm highlighting right now, we've got the logo in the top left and the navigation links and buttons in the top right. So if we want to move or copy and paste this into our theme, why don't we open up that new folder that we downloaded just a moment ago, and let's open this index.html file in our text editor. All right, so this is the HTML that is creating this page. And if we're interested in this top header part, all we need to do is look right below the opening body tag here, and we see a header element. So let's just place our cursor at the very beginning of that header tag, and then scroll down a bit, and you'll see that that header element closes right here. So I'm just going to hold down the Shift key on my keyboard and click at the end of it here. Cool. And now with that code highlighted, let's just copy it into our clipboard. And now we want to paste it into one of the files in our WordPress theme folder. So I know this is getting a little bit confusing. That's why I'm using one text editor with a light color scheme and another text editor with a dark color scheme, right? So this dark screen is the files that we just downloaded a minute ago. And this light screen is the WordPress theme folder that we've been working on for several lessons now. So here's what I want you to do. In your theme folder, jump into our header.php file. And right below the opening body tag, let's delete this h1 element, and then go ahead and paste in your clipboard. Okay, and if we save this and refresh our WordPress site, here's the new header content. Now it's not styled yet, and that's because we haven't moved over any CSS code yet. Don't worry, we'll do that in just a minute or two. But next, let's move over the footer from the HTML page, right? So on this page, if we scroll down to the very bottom, we see this footer section that we are probably going to want on every page of the website. So back in the recently downloaded index.html file, if we go ahead and scroll down to the very bottom of it, right above the closing body tag and this script tag, we see a footer element. So why don't we place our cursor at the end of the footer element and then scroll up a bit. Okay, and here we see the opening tag for the footer. So let's just hold down the Shift key on our keyboard and click at the very beginning of the footer element. Then copy this into our clipboard. And then we want to paste it into our theme folder's footer.php file. So back in our WordPress theme folder, jump into your footer.php file. And we want to leave these lines intact, but let's go ahead and delete this dummy paragraph, and then just go ahead and paste in your clipboard. And if we save that and refresh the WordPress site, now we've got the footer in place. However, we still don't have any sort of styling or design or CSS. So let's just take the CSS from this page and add it to our theme. So in that same folder where we just borrowed code from the index.html file, what I want you to do is move these 4 folders into your WordPress theme folder. So the 4 folders that I want you to move over are called Build, CSS, Images, and SRC. So we want to move those 4 folders into our theme folder. And if you're wondering how to find your theme folder, well, if you're using the local app to work with WordPress locally, you can just right-click on the site and choose Reveal in Finder or Show in Explorer. So that should open up your local sites folder. Then you just click into the selected folder for the particular site you're working on. Go into App, Public, WP Content. Hopefully this is a bit familiar. Then you just go into the Themes folder. Our theme is named Fictional University Theme. So now this is the location where I just want you to move over these 4 folders from the file we downloaded earlier in the video. So just move over those 4 folders. I'm just going to drag them into my WordPress theme folder here. And now let's just go tell our theme to actually use some of these new files. So do this with me. In our theme folder, jump into our functions.php file. Within our function called University Files, here we're loading a style sheet. We can leave this first argument in place, but let's hollow out the second argument. So I'm just going to remove this get style sheet URI call because I no longer just want to load style.css. Now, while we do need the style.css file, if I jump into it, just for these comments up here to give WordPress a bit of information about our theme, we don't have to include all of our CSS in this file. So I'm actually going to remove this body color green test code inside of style.css, but leave this comment in place. WordPress will know where to find this. But back in functions.php, let's just load a CSS file from the build folder, right, to pull in some of the existing CSS that will create this design. So do this with me. For this second argument here, let's say get theme file URI, parentheses to call that, give it a string of text, and then slash, look inside the build folder, slash, and then the file name is style-index.css. Let's load one other CSS file. So I want you to just duplicate or copy and paste this entire line of code here. And on the second copy, let's change the nickname of the file to maybe University Extra Styles. And then just change the file name we're looking for to look inside the build folder for index.css. Okay, let's go ahead and give that a save. And then if we refresh on the front end of our website, we see the hint of a design shining through. Okay, now looking at this page, I see all sorts of things we need to fix. So let's just start working through it bit by bit. So you'll notice down here in the footer, underneath this Connect With Us column, back in the HTML template for this page, there's supposed to be social network icons there. And when I created this page, I used an icon package named Font Awesome. So we just need to make sure that we load the Font Awesome icon pack in our WordPress theme. Let me show you what I'm talking about. So if we open the index.html file that we downloaded earlier in this lesson, and we scroll up to the very top of it, you'll notice that in the head section on this line, I'm loading the Font Awesome icon library. Now your first instinct might be to copy and paste this line into the header.php file in WordPress, but that's not the ideal way of doing things. Let me show you why. So back in our WordPress theme folder, if we jump into header.php, up at the top, here's our head section. And remember that instead of loading CSS files directly here, we added this WP head function so that WordPress can be in control of loading different files and assets. So if we want to load another CSS file that loads up the Font Awesome icon pack, we actually want to jump into our theme's functions.php file. We're already loading two CSS files here, so let's just duplicate this WP onQ style line once again. For me, it's already in my clipboard, so I'll just duplicate or paste that line in once again. And let's just change this first argument, the nickname of the file, to be font-awesome. And then the second argument is just where we point towards the file, so the file location. Instead of calling getThemeFileURI, let's delete that and just have the second argument be a string of text, because instead of loading a file locally, we just want to provide a web address or URL to a file. Now, if we jump back into our index.html template file, you can see here that I was loading Font Awesome from an external URL. So let's just copy and paste part of this URL into WordPress. So do this with me. Place your cursor in between this colon and the first forward slash, and then I want you to select all the way to the end of the file name. So it ends in .css. Okay, so with that selected, let's copy it into our clipboard. And then back in our WordPress functions.php file, just paste that in between the quotes for this second argument. Cool. So now if we save and refresh, those icons are in place. Now let's move on to the next fix. So the next thing that I notice is that the text on this page is using a generic font, but the text on the HTML template is using a custom font. And if we look at this index.html file in our text editor, right above the Font Awesome line, you can see on this line, I'm loading custom fonts from Google. So if we want to move this over into WordPress, let's just jump back into our theme's functions.php file. We want to load another external CSS file, so just duplicate this most recent line that we just wrote. So I'll just duplicate that line. Let's change the nickname from Font Awesome on this duplicate copy to instead be, how about, and I'm just making this name up, Custom Google Fonts. Okay, then let's hollow out the quotes for the second value. We just need an external web address to load the file from. So back in the template file that we're borrowing from, here's that Google Fonts. You would just begin by selecting the 2 slashes and then just select until the end of that value. It should end in 700i. Just copy that. Back in our WordPress file, just paste that into these quotes. And if we save that and then refresh, and it's a subtle change, but you can see that we are now using custom fonts. Next, let's focus on the actual content of the home page, right? So instead of this generic listing that loops through our blog posts, instead of that, why don't we work on importing this custom welcome area and 2-column layout and slideshow? So to do that, let's jump back into our index.html template. And you can scroll up to the very top, and then you'll notice that we've already imported this header element. So scroll down a bit until you get to the end of the header element. And then let's place our cursor right before this page banner element. Okay, and then let's scroll down all the way to the bottom, right before the footer element begins. So we don't want to include this. We've already copied and pasted that. So just hold down Shift and click right here at the end of this div. So let's just copy that to our clipboard. And then let's jump over to our WordPress theme folder. And the file that controls the home page is index.php. Now in this file, we still want to begin by including the header template, and we still want to end by including the footer template, but we want to get rid of everything in between. So let's delete this test placeholder loop code that we wrote earlier. Okay, and now we want to paste in the HTML from our clipboard, but you'll notice that we are currently in PHP mode. So on this line, let's just drop out of PHP. And then right before get footer, we can enter back into PHP. So that means right here, we are in HTML. So we can just go ahead and paste in our clipboard. Let's save that and refresh the WordPress site. Looks good. We just have 2 quick problems to solve. The first issue is that we are missing the images or photographs that should be displayed here, and then down here as well. And the second problem is that this slideshow section isn't behaving like a slideshow. Okay, so let's fix both of those things, but let's begin with the missing photos. We just need to update our HTML to look for the images in the right folder. So back in our text editor, in our theme folder, jump into index.php, and up towards the very top of the file, you'll see a div with a class of page banner bg image. And it's using an inline style that's trying to pull in a background image. And this code tells the web browser to look within the current folder for a subfolder named images, and look inside it for a JPEG named library hero. So the reason our photo isn't loading is because if we go up to our address bar, we don't have an images folder in the root of our domain or the root of our project directory. Instead, we do have a WordPress folder named wp-content, and then within that folder we have a themes folder, and then the name of our specific theme is fictional university theme, and that is where the images folder lives. So then we could look within there for libraryhero.jpg. Okay, cool. So this path works, but look how long this is. You probably don't want to have to type this out every time you want to load an image. So let's go back and jump back into our text editor, and I'll show you a trick. So go ahead and select this current path. So from images to JPEG, copy that into your clipboard, and then go ahead and delete it. Okay, so now we just have empty parentheses. And what we're going to do is drop into PHP, because WordPress has a function here that can help us. So within the PHP tags, let's echo out the results of a WordPress function named get underscore theme underscore file underscore URI. And it's a function, so open up parentheses. And it only takes a single argument, so quotes. So now just add a / and then paste in your clipboard, and that's all we need to do. This WordPress function will generate the path to our theme folder all on its own. Cool, so let's save this and refresh, and we're in business. Now let's just do the same thing for the 3 images down here at the bottom of the page. So back in index.php, if you scroll down to the very bottom, we see images bread, images apples, and images bus. So go ahead and pause the lesson and adjust these 3 image paths the same way that we just adjusted the image up at the top. The only problem now is that this section isn't cycling through the 3 slides. It's just showing all 3 slides stacked on top of each other. All we need to do to fix that is load a JavaScript file that handles the slideshow behavior. So back in our text editor, jump into our themes functions.php file, and loading a JavaScript file is just like loading a CSS file. So right above this line, let's add a new line, and let's call a function named WP_onQ, and then instead of style, it's script. Within the parentheses, the first argument is our chance to name the file. The name doesn't really matter. Let's just call it main university JavaScript. The second argument is where we point towards the file that we want to load. To point towards the JavaScript file, let's use a function named getThemeFileURI, and it's a function, so parentheses, quotes for a string of text, and then just slash, look inside the build folder, slash, and the file name is index.js. Now, loading a JavaScript file requires a few more arguments than when we load a CSS file. So after the quote and then this parentheses, let's include a comma so we can add another argument. And WordPress wants to know if this script depends on any other scripts, right? Does it have any dependencies? So after the comma, let's add a space. Let's have an array. So array parentheses. And we only have one dependency, so just string of text, jQuery. Now later in the course, I will provide jQuery free alternative code. So in that case, you wouldn't need to include jQuery here. But in a lot of our original JavaScript example problems, we will use jQuery. So that's why I'm including it here. If and when you're not using jQuery, your value here could simply be null if your JavaScript doesn't depend on any other JavaScript. But for now, I'm just going to leave this in place. Let's have a comma, another argument. This is the version number for your script. I'll just give it a value of 1.0. And then the final argument is basically WordPress asking us, do you want to load this file right before the closing body tag? Yes or no? So we say yes or true. And that way it loads at the bottom of the page instead of up in the head section, which is much better for overall performance. So if we save this and refresh, now we have typical slideshow behavior. Perfect. That's going to bring this lesson to a close. In our next lesson, we'll start working on an interior page template. Let's keep it rolling.